All right, well, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, welcome the CEO. Give yourself a hand. CEO, Center for Employment Opportunities, is a space and a place that is for brothers and sisters who believe in a second shot.
To the people at CEO, I love them, because if it wasn't for them, I'll probably be back in prison right now. I've been on a job interview. He asked me, about myself, my life, work experience, conviction. And thanks to CEO, I was able to answer that question. And he was like, Scott, you got the job.
I think the essence of CEO is that we offer an immediate opportunity to people who are coming home from prison, who are motivated to do the right thing. But it's just hard to make it clear that what we do matters for everyone.
Nonprofits like CEO need access to great talent, but don't always have the resources to find it. Catch a Fire comes in and matches nonprofits to professionals who want to give their time and their skills pro bono.
MTV partnered with Catch a Fire and did a national search to all of your nonprofits and said which of them could benefit from an overhaul by the staff at MTV.
I was just so excited that something as iconic as MTV would even be interested in something like CEO.
From that first meeting to us having joint conversations, whether it be on the phone or email exchanges, and doing it in a way that is fresh and very, very thoughtful and very intense, but not intrusive.
Our goal was to give CEO a set of materials that they could work with now, but would also kind of grow with them over time. We're creating deliverables kind of in two key areas, storytelling, and there's also a social component where we'll be helping them kind of with their social story as they move forward.
I had some line that they're not changing lives, they're helping already changed lives do better.
So many people get comfortable in their corporate jobs that they forget, to take the time out to really, go out in the world and try to make a difference and to help change a life.
I haven't had this kind of collaboration of this caliber ever, and I've worked here for, 2 decades.
I think once you have the experience, you want to keep doing it, 1. 2, those people who didn't get to want to be part of that process. So I just think it is happily the wave of the future, and I think it's a really hopeful trend that is going to drive our audience and drive business as a result.
If you can do it for us, we have a very tough product to sell in a way, and I think to show that you can do something meaningful for an organization like CEO means you can do it anywhere for anyone.
It's a pleasure to be up here. I'm Rachel, Mindy, and Jason, and we're gonna have a chat. So it's gonna be a little bit of a different format. We're each gonna ask each other questions. We've gotten to know each other over the course of almost a year at this point, but this is the first time that we've come together, the 3 of us, to actually debrief. So we're gonna use this as a forum to debrief in front of you, if you don't mind. So, shall we?
We shall.
Absolutely. Okay.
I actually have the first question for you, Rachel, given that Catch a Fire was in many ways the inspiration for this project and the glue that held it together. Can you talk a little bit about Catch a Fire and the model and what you're setting out to do?
Sure. So you saw a little bit in the video. Catch a Fire, as Jason said, is this glue or this intermediary that connects talent to purpose, very broadly speaking. Specifically, what we're doing is we're connecting people who want to volunteer their skills. And I caught the end of the last panel. Somebody said this is not volunteerism. And in a way, for us, it's not as well. It's the idea that people who are talented, your employees, have these great skills and they want to do something purposeful with them outside of just their job. And so we're connecting people who have those skills and want to give back in a meaningful way to the nonprofit or the for-purpose sector to nonprofits and social enterprises who need that talent. So we do this in 2 ways. 1, we have an open platform, catchafire.org, that any professional can come to, register, and get access to well-structured, defined pro bono projects with our 3,000 nonprofit partners. The other way that we do this is we work with corporate partners such as MTV, and we connect those companies and the talent in those companies to one of our nonprofit partners or many of our nonprofit partners. In the case of this project, we were connecting one nonprofit, an amazing nonprofit CEO, who Mindy will tell you more about, to MTV to essentially do a nonprofit makeover. So I guess in sum, Catch a Fire is, our vision is that talent in the for-profit sector, because there's certainly talent in the nonprofit sector as well, but talent in the for-profit sector will be able to connect more easily with the nonprofit sector, to be able to give back in a really meaningful way, meaning that philanthropy has been the more common way that corporate America has given. And I think that will continue, but I think that the wave of the future, to use Stephen's words, is when corporate America's talent actually is able to give that to the for-purpose sector.
Great.
So I have a question for you, Mindy. You're the CEO of an incredible organization called the Center for Employment Opportunities, CEO. And you guys have been around for over 2 decades now. You're highly effective. You're very well known, not only in New York, but all over the United States for the work that you do to help the formerly incarcerated get access to jobs. Why is something like Catch a Fire interesting to you, even though, as CEO of such a highly effective organization, arguably you can access the talent that you need to get the job done?
Well, first, thanks for both inviting me here, but also for saying such nice things about CEO. I think in some respects it's true. We are a very high-performing organization. We really believe in performance. We kind of develop a culture around performance, and one of the reasons that we can do that is because we only do one thing with one group of people. We're entirely focused on employment, and we're entirely and exclusively focused on working with formerly incarcerated people. So that gives a lot of clarity to the mission of CEO, and we are, I think, a very effective organization. We've worked really hard to evaluate ourselves, but also make sure that we put our organization to the test, and just echoing some of the comments that were made in the introduction about not just the cost in terms of individual lives, with respect to incarceration, but also the cost to communities, the cost to neighborhoods, the costs to everybody in this room. America incarcerates more people than any place in the whole world. About half of those people are under the age of 30, and it's at tremendous cost. Depending on the estimates you see, it can be over $70 billion a year that the country is spending on incarceration, and therefore not on a whole host of other things. And we put ourselves to the test, and not only do we reduce incarceration and improve lives and improve communities, but we also save close to $4 for every dollar that's spent on CEO. That's what we focus on, that's what we do. So yes, we're high performing, but there's a whole host of things that we don't have strong expertise in, because we're so mission driven and we're so focused on our outcomes, and it's harder than you think to really draw upon the right kinds of expertise and the right kinds of resources. Most nonprofits, I'm here to tell you, are very flat. You've got a few people who do everything, and a couple of them are here, and it's not as easy as you think to get the job done. And what I liked about Catch a Fire, and it's sort of a funny story because I just happened to answer the phone. It came in on my internal line, and so I just picked it up, and it was somebody from Catch a Fire, and they were about to go into the whole Catch a Fire pitch, but it was one of those, you had me at hello moments, because they were just so succinct in not only that it was very cost effective, but what I liked about it was that you could choose from a menu of options. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm here to sell you marketing services, or I'm here if you have human capital needs, or I'm here if you have budget deficiencies that you want an expert to come in and manage on your behalf. So what I liked was that it was flexible, that it could meet the needs that we had, and as you probably know, they're not always the same. They can shift around over time. And it felt like a really good fit, that the model was a very good fit for CEO, and it could help us meet some of the things that we needed to address at that time, one of which, as you know, was marketing. And that's what led, of course, to the whole MTV project, but I think we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I just think that no matter how high performing you are as a nonprofit, you always have deficits. There's just things you're not expert at and things you really need to draw on in an effective way from private and public partners.
Right, so I think that's a very important point that you said, because we're so mission driven, essentially what I'm hearing is that you've focused, how many employees do you have at this point?
Well, we have about just shy of 200 employees. And this is actually a good point, and I think you might be leading in this direction, which is that CEO has been headquartered in New York City for a very, very long time. And it's only recently, in the last 4 years, that we began to expand outside New York City. So we now have 10 offices across the country in New York, California, and Oklahoma. So we're serving over 3,000 people a year now. And again, that leads to other things that we have to attend to once you're a national organization.
Right. And that the majority of those 200 employees are working on program
yes.
as opposed to operations. And that is where the fit came in. Is
That's why I look so tired in the video.
We all do.
It really takes a lot of hours.
Right, is that MTV was a perfect fit from the standpoint of helping bolster the branding, marketing, communications piece. So then I guess to you, Jason, as the head of MTV's pro-social department, as well as the other hats that you wear, there's a couple things. One, the fact that MTV has a pro-social department, I think, says a lot in and of itself. So first question is, how does pro-social differ from CSR? And then, given that, how, is that part of the reason why working on this project was pretty much a no-brainer for MTV, meaning that, Stephen, the president of MTV, and I sat down, and he actually it wasn't just me coming up with this idea. He was the one who was like, well, we have talent, you guys have nonprofits, why don't we match the two up? So can you tell me a little bit about, the pro-social aspect of MTV, and then perhaps what makes MTV so ready to do pro bono, and how does it fit into who you are, and that it's not something on the side, but it really is very core?
Sure. I think there's a lot of factors that are overlaid that all kind of come together to make this partnership something that we were instantly excited about, and something that actually had a big impact on our employees that participated in it. I think from the very beginning, MTV's had in its blood this sense that we have a responsibility to do more than entertain. We were the first network in the world to air safe sex PSAs. We were founded shortly after the discovery of HIV, and that's something that we've been focused on from the very early going. I think we've been for a long time been aware of and committed to advancing LGBT rights and equality more broadly, and realizing that storytelling represents a way to do that. So I think that goes back to the founding of the channel. More recently, my boss, your mentor now, Stephen Friedman, he founded the public affairs department that I now run in 1997, where we were doing this stuff and we had success with campaigns like Choose or Lose, but it hadn't been codified, it hadn't been institutionalized in a highly strategic fashion, and he was brought in to initiate that and found that effort, and that's the public affairs department that we, for shorthand, call pro-social. It's like an odd phrase that we gets bandied around our building. We don't use it externally that much, but I think it is interesting that you call it out, because I think it does represent something very different than conventional CSR. So I view conventional CSR as playing stakes. I view it as the absolute minimum that you have to do if you run a business. Like, you should not make the world a worse place. You should inherently make the world a better place in whatever way. And you should use the things that are core in your business to do that. We view pro-social as a +1 and sometimes a +10, where it's not just who is the nonprofit we're going to give a novelty check to once a year, what are the nice things we're going to put in our annual report that we did to make the world a better place. We view pro-social and public affairs as using MTV's superpowers for good. How do we fundamentally empower our audience to make an impact in the world that they could not make on their own? Like, what are the ways that we can be a megaphone for them? What are the ways that we can truly give them access to resources and platforms that they wouldn't have otherwise? And that's the job that I have the privilege of doing. And we think about that in terms of not just what's this symbolic or token thing we could do, but like, how do we use our core assets to really empower the audience? And we've done that on voter registration, we've done that on mental health, we've done that on sexual health and a lot of other things. So all that's the setup that when we're prompted with this, we know that our audience expects this from us, it's not optional. And we know that our employees, who more than 50% are millennial, expect this from us. They expect these kinds of opportunities because there's such huge demand that when we launch a new campaign we're going to roll out to the audience, we have to have these creative bake-offs where it's really like a competition of ideas to see who can come up with the most creative approach. And those are the individuals that are going to get the privilege of working on these efforts. And same with this. Like, there were tons of people who wanted to be a part of this project because there's such a hunger and such a desire to do meaningful work when you come to work. And I think that an effort like this is critical to our need to attract and retain the best talent, because they're going to come work. They're going to be excited to come to MTV already, but they're going to be even more excited to come and stay at MTV if we offer opportunities like this.
Can you talk a little bit about the team? Because I was really blown away by the quality of talent. I mean, obviously you were on the team. The executive vice president of all of marketing was on the team. And so can you talk about a little bit about the team? And then also, I was really struck by how intentional you all were in picking CEO. And this was, our partnership started from the very beginning. Every aspect was a partnership in, I think, the truest sense of the word, even where Catch a Fire's our expertise was helping to connect you to the right nonprofit. You certainly weighed in terms of, what cause was some of the criteria for the causes that you were thinking about. And then the process that we went through where, as Stephen mentioned, we invited hundreds of nonprofits to apply for this opportunity, and you guys picked CEO. So team, and then how you chose CEO.
Mm-hmm. I'll take them in reverse order. I think the way we picked CEO was we looked at the really amazing candidates that you identified and brought to us, and we asked ourselves, where can we have the biggest impact? Like, if we were to work with one of these organizations, where do our strong suits offset some shortcomings or some needs that organization would have? And how could a concentrated burst of energy from a group of our top talent really make a meaningful difference, not only in the physical artifacts, the products that we could give to that organization, say, here, go do what you do better, but the lessons that we could provide that would transfer and then become internalized and be learnings that would carry on. And I think the other thing is we really look for weak signals. We really look for things that are underexposed. And I think that prison reform in America, recidivism, these are issues that don't get nearly the attention that they should. And that was something that was very appealing to us, to say, not only can we have that knowledge transfer, not only can we give a great intellectual and creative challenge to the team, but we would love to be able to dial up the profile and the attention that's paid to something that is so core to so many issues. And I think we were really blown away as we learned more about the model and the impact and how it is such a multiplier effect in so many different directions. So that was something that was really appealing to us. I think the team building that out was really a function of the needs of the organization. And that's one thing that Catch a Fire was very adamant about, is like identifying that right fit between the needs of the organization and the skills of the the corporate partner that would be contributing that. And there are times where actually you guys were being great taskmasters and saying we have to decide who are the partners, which team members, and we weren't ready to make that decision yet because we were still getting a sense through conversations with CEO on where could our efforts be best suited. Like what could we give to CEO and partner with them in ways that would really truly be meaningful. And so we held back on that, and then once we had clarity and a plan of attack, it's like, okay, clearly, like our head of social media, who's grown MTV from 2 million followers to over 170 million across all of our social platforms, like let's tap into what he knows about social media engagement and teach and work with CEO to understand that so that they can use that and so forth. So that's a little bit about that piece. I'd love to get into more with you, Mindy, about just, it's been a little while since we finished. I haven't seen you actually since we had the champagne toast at the end of the project. Right. I'd love to hear more about, from your perspective, going into this, your expectations and how this either aligned with that or differed. Anything you can share about like the impact that what we developed is having, and then also tips for other organizations and things that you learned through this process that you think are really important for others to keep in mind as they're pursuing skilled volunteerism projects.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it was just an unbelievable privilege to get the opportunity to work with your team. And, you sort of said it as a throwaway, and yes, of course, we put our best people on it. That's not what normally happens. I mean, the fact that the top talent of an organization that is, so prestigious and so skilled, that would spend the time and energy, the burst of energy, as you said, on CEO was just an extraordinary thing for us. And, we've had a lot of pro bono experience in the past, and a lot of it is transactional, and you can get some terrific work out of that. You've got a lease negotiation, and you don't have a general counsel. Those are things that are really meaningful to how organizations work. But to get something pro bono that's so holistic, I think is very rare. And I think one of the reasons that it worked, and I'll give a couple of examples of what I mean by work, is the fit, the match, which I think was really important, and also the match on our end. It takes two to play. It takes both sides to make something work, and we put our best team on this also. Tanai Mills from our operation, who's here, who's our head of external and legislative affairs, has worked at CEO in a variety of senior capacities, really understands who we are and what we need. She was detailed to this almost full time. So if I were saying to somebody who was entering into a project like this, A, you can't steal Tanai from CEO, but B, you want to find somebody like that who really knows the ropes, who can speak for the organization, who can manage all the moving parts. I think on our end, that's what made the match really work. And it's been an extraordinary experience. I mean, a couple of the big takeaways were just sort of how we present ourselves. I mean, you even saw it a little bit here today. Rachel prompted me to say, how good we are and where we are and all of that, because you just get so focused just on doing the work. So to lift the work up, even something simple like just tell people one fact per page. Don't overwhelm. Just really try to drive the point home. Make it matter to other people. Always asking the question, why should people care? And I think that's a really important question. And I'm telling you, when you're in the trenches every day, you don't ask that question that often. So, and it wasn't even like you all created a whole new set of photo images for us, for example. We had all that stuff. You said to us, look at what you have. Look how valuable it is. Here's a better way to use it. Here's the background color you want to use that means life and prosperity, just things that we would never know. Here are words that are more impactful on other people. Here's a way that we think we can help you build a volunteer army out there of people who really care about social justice, just really helping us lift our game, tell our story. And it's not an easy story to tell. It's not immediately obvious that incarceration affects everyone, as Tanai likes to say. It's not an easy story to tell, and I think the big takeaway, the lasting legacy, is that we can tell our story better. And it's not a static thing, like here's your stuff, see you later, have a nice life. I mean, it's a way of thinking. it really changed the way we think about what we say and the messages that we send. And I've test-driven it a couple of different times in some pretty big forums, and it's made a big impact. And so already, I think we're seeing some real returns on the investment. So, but back at you. so what was it like for you? I mean, as you said, it's in your DNA, and you've done this kind of thing before. Like, how did it work for you, and what was your takeaway, and did it impact at all how you all think about what you do and what you thought you could take away from the experience?
It's a great question. We have a lot of experience working with nonprofits. I mean, some of the campaigns we've built have upwards of 20 to 30 partners in a coalition, but it's more of what I would call like a slow drip. Like we're working in shorter bursts around like a longer arc project, where this was very concentrated, where we flood the zone with all this top talent and said, how much can we physically get done in this 3 to 4 month window? How big of an impact can we make in that time? How much can we learn about this and deliver against it? And I think that there was such a strong and positive reaction to, there was an intimacy with this that we often don't get. So we work with a lot of other partners, and we're in touch with them on the phone, and we're learning from them, and we're building campaigns out. But like to actually go and be in the life skills class at CEO, like everybody who went there and had a chance to sit in this class and really put themselves in the shoes of somebody who's just been released from prison, like literally like last week, and is now trying to turn their lives around. I think everybody who went down there and had that experience was so taken aback and moved and had a new empathy and perspective on this issue. And I can't tell you how many advocates you built just amongst our team and seeing the work that you do, and how tangible it was just to see the work that you guys are doing and how it is helping somebody in that moment turn their lives around. I think a lot of times we do this pro-social work and we look at it in aggregate and we're interested in like what's the overall impact that we're making, but this was really about the micro impact, the individual impact, and I think that was really a big deal. And I think we did learn a great deal too about like how this works and doesn't, and I think we probably jammed a lot into a small time, and we had to be cognizant of some other big projects that are critical to our business that were happening concurrently. And there were some people who, I mean, I'll share just a little bit from the results of this poll we did afterwards in terms of people's response. It was tremendously positive, but what everybody did say is that it did at times kind of push us to our limit in terms of our capacity, understanding that we have a lot of other stuff we have to do day to day. And I think that's something we want to be mindful of moving forward, is everybody finds this work meaningful. Everybody wants to do it, but we need to make it as inviting as possible for them, so it's not making it more difficult for them to get other work done. So like having that flexibility in there, and that was self-imposed to a great deal because we had some deadlines we were trying to hit.
Right, and we like to suck people in. It's part of it. It's part of our DNA. And so Rachel, kind of similar question. So it's as an intermediary, I mean, we too operate as an intermediary in a lot of ways between our formerly incarcerated job seekers and our employers. And so I sort of get, how important that role is, but also how tricky it can be to make the right match and to play that role. So can you talk a little bit more about that in this specific situation?
Sure,
Whether it was challenging or how it felt and what you got out of it?
Totally, I would be happy to, but before I do that, can I actually just hear those results that you were alluding to?
I'll sneak them in, because we really wanted to understand the impact that the project had and how did people react to that participated in it. And it was astounding. So of the employees who worked on this project, 90% either enjoyed or really enjoyed the experience. 100% found the project to be personally fulfilling, and 80% that they were likely or very likely to recommend the experience to a colleague. And then also the open questions that we offered were just like, this was inspiring. I was more excited to come to work on the days that I was working on this project. So it's difficult to quantify the impact that has on the morale of your employees and how excited they are about working at your company. And I mean, we're all locked in big time struggles to get the best talent, and that's the lifeblood of all of our businesses. So I can't stress it enough in terms of how critical a part that was and how much it makes us want to do this again and again and again and make it part of our core offering, that what we'll tout to employees as we try and attract the best to MTV. So I'm sorry. You were saying.
Cool. I'm glad the results were so awesome.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I didn't know that, actually.
So to answer your question, Mindy, as an intermediary, what is experience like? And perhaps the bigger question is, do we need an intermediary? Like, can you guys do this on your own? And I think that that's certainly a goal for us as a mission-driven organization that wants to make it commonplace for people to volunteer their skills and want to drive great talent to the nonprofit sector. It's something that we ask ourselves all the time is, where are we most useful in, for instance, making the match? So having you find MTV and helping MTV find you. Obviously, Catch a Fire plays a role in there. But I think, in my opinion, and I would love to get your thoughts on it, the setting up of the project, the managing expectations on both sides. Jason called it taskmastering sometimes, and certainly Adrienne did that. She was a taskmaster at times, and she played that role to protect the time of your employees as well as to make sure that your team, Mindy, was getting the most out of it. And so I think that pro bono is hard because volunteering, the exchange is not something that we're used to. It's not monetary. There's nothing very clear that's being exchanged. And so what Catch a Fire is trying to do is help make that clear, because there is an exchange and it's two-sided. It's not just that a nonprofit is getting something for free. It's that the other side should be receiving something as well, and that should be a great, fulfilling experience. That should be, employees being excited and proud of the company that they work at. It should be a lot of things that perhaps aren't so tangible, but are very real. And so, as Catch a Fire, we're trying to make those things very clearly known at the upfront, and we want to make sure that those conversations that perhaps are hard to have in the beginning are had up front, so that when both parties come together, not only is the project well scoped and well structured, and the folks who are giving their time and their talent know exactly what they're giving, and that the receiving party knows exactly what they should be expecting and can you can have expectations that you don't have to be afraid to say, this is the standard that I expect from this work. We want to make sure that you as a nonprofit can say those things, and that the giving party, the people who are giving their time and the talent, also have structure around that, so that it's a great experience on both sides. And so we found that it actually is really critical. If you think about it, it's 2013, and pro bono or skills-based is actually very rare. Only 5% of nonprofits use pro bono well, and look at corporate America, where the majority of the talent resides. Only a very small number of companies are actually putting their workforces to use when it comes to pro bono, and when they do it, they usually do it at a very, very, very small scale, as opposed to getting, for instance, 50%, even 20%, even 10% of their workforce engaged. And I think that problem speaks a lot to how difficult it is actually to get both parties who have something to offer each other to come together and actually collaborate and partner. Mm-hmm. So that's the role that we're trying to play. Mm-hmm. Is to make it actually easy.
Yeah, and I think we really felt that. I mean, I would say three quick things about this engagement from your participation that made it different for us. One, just plain and simple, there is no way that we would ever have had access to something like MTV were we to just try to do that on our own. First, I don't even think we would have set the bar that high, to be honest, So that's just, you can't replace that. That's just an unbelievably important thing. The second thing was the match, as we've been talking about before, just, sort of making sure there's a good culture fit, there's a good need fit, the approach itself. But finally, to your point about the precision and the rigor of the engagement itself, it's sort of like you get the best of a narrow transaction because, you're negotiating a lease, you get the lease done, that's it. So you're marrying that kind of precision and rigor with something that's much broader and more holistic, but breaking it down and chunking the work, as they say, just to make sure that everybody's kept on point and that the project itself has a realistic scope, which is what I remember, really trying to make sure what's doable in what time frame, and really making sure that it's precise so we could get the best of both worlds, the precision of a one-off transaction with the holistic kind of lasting impact of something like what we ended up engaged in. And I thought that was really important.
I would echo that. I think you've got two parties who both have very clear mandates. MTV is to entertain America's youth, CEO, what you guys do for those who are just coming out of prison. And I think there's another really critical part of setting this up for success, and it's identifying what's the best exchange here. Like, what do they most need, and what can the other party give? And I think the role that Catch a Fire played in the very beginning of scoping that out and making it modular, because it was really, there are several directions we could go, not 50, but 5 or 6, and then we were able to look at those 5 or 6 and say, we feel really good about these 3. We feel really good that we can hit the mark and deliver real value against those needs. In the absence of that, I don't know, it would have been a lot more difficult for us to scope this out in the outset, because we would both be running 100 miles an hour doing what we need to do. And then I think setting up those milestones, having the urgency and the deadlines to keep us honest and accountable, I think we all need that, because again, things get done every day based on what are the deadlines on your short list. And this helped ensure that we had those mileposts as we went along to get us in a position to be able to deliver this at the end of it, and for it to be meaningful for you guys. So yeah, I can't state that enough. I think having an intermediary is really critical, and it served really well in this instance.
Before we open it up to you all for questions, one last question that I have for you, Jason, as the corporate person in the room here on this little panel, is you mentioned that, for MTV, this experience is one that that you want to repeat over and over again. How do you think that we can get pro bono to become common and normal for every company to do?
It's a great question. It's so hard for me sometimes to put myself in the shoes of my peers who have similar jobs as I do, because I don't have any skepticism from my boss, who also happens to be the head of the network, saying like, why would we do this? What's the value in this? What's the ROI? What's the return? He philosophically knows that this is critical, from audience engagement and the way that we build that relationship with our audience, and from an employee relationship standpoint. So I'm really lucky in that regard, that I don't need to come up with ways to put a dollar value on this or that, or how this was good for the business. I think it's really critical that at a senior level, that people buy in and stop questioning the value in this. I think the fact that all you are here speaks volumes, because you have your jobs for a reason. Your bosses realize that there's value in this. I think the more that takes hold philosophically, the better. And I think that'll lend more momentum to this. In the meanwhile, it will be incumbent upon all of us in these roles to find those ways to create hard evidence around the value that this brings to the business, and to be smart and creative about how we demonstrate that. And I think it'll make it easier and easier to continue to do more of this. And I think it's critically important.
Awesome. All right. Do you guys have any last words before we hand it over to our audience?
No, I think we should take some questions.
Okay. Would love questions from anyone out there. Great. So the question is, how does Catch a Fire choose the company that we're working with? We are open to working with every company. We want, again, our mission is to make this commonplace. So we want to help every company make it possible for their employees to volunteer their skills or do pro bono. The way in which we work with companies is to first understand where a company's at and what it is that they are trying to achieve. So doing that, essentially consulting in a way to understand what it is they want and what the vision is for it. And we will help also guide that thinking, since we have now relationships with many companies, and we're seeing trends, and we're seeing where this is headed and how it is good for business. So we'll be your partner in that process, but we're open to working with any company that wants to do this. But we do vet for readiness. It is difficult to work with companies, for instance, that don't have buy-in from some key players, and that's just the reality. So we do look for leadership buy-in. That's really critical, because this is not something that is your traditional pro bono program that touches 12 people in the company. For instance, with our work with Blue Cross Blue Shield, we invited in North Carolina their entire employee base of 4,000 employees to participate on pro bono projects that were 30 hours in length each. And so this is something that affects an entire workforce, which is why key decision maker buy-in is really critical. There's a question back there.
Yes, Dr. Adolson, we will Liberty TV executive producer. My question is for Ms. Mindy. Regarding your program, some of these people you put into the jobs and things, how many of them actually stay in there and it leads to a full-time job, or how many of them drop out? Can you maybe give us like an incremental breakdown with the 2 decades you've been in business?
Yes, of course. We start off by giving everybody an immediate paid transitional job. So everyone who comes to CEO gets hired. And we are able to help build work skills that way. So we've worked with over 35,000 people during the time that we have been an independent nonprofit in those paid transitional jobs. We've been able to move from there to over 17,000 full-time, unsubsidized jobs. So we're placing on the order of, between 50 and 60% of those folks in full-time jobs, and they're able to keep jobs and stay employed. We follow up for a year, and that's starting to get closer and closer to the 50% mark. And we work with everyone. We don't screen at the front door. We don't have to pass a test in order to come into CEO. If you want to work and you're motivated to work and you have a recent criminal conviction, we will work with you. So the funnel is actually quite wide, which in my view makes the results more impressive, because we're not kind of creaming at the front door, and we're constantly trying to improve our work.